Hello and welcome to the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Today I'm joined by Adam, one of our Beyond Compulsion Academy clients. Adam's been in the program quite a while now. It's coming up to maybe a year, maybe even longer than a year. I'm not entirely sure. And I saw that you'd posted inside of BCA about a week ago, talking about how the world sorely needs people who are able to actually be in control of their desires, stop watching pornography, and kind of take a different path in life, I suppose, right? And it kind of just piqued my curiosity and interest. Thought, right, Adam, what you up to next week? Do you want to jump on a podcast? And you were like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And here we are. So first of all, I just want to kind of check in with you, because we've not spoke to you on the podcast for a while. We did a different one with Mary, like way back. But yeah, do you want to just kind of share how things have been, I guess, since you last came on the podcast? Because I'm sure there'll be some listeners who listen to that one and they're a bit intrigued, like, oh, I wonder how, Adam's getting on with things.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so we did a podcast last August. And unfortunately, after that podcast, I decided to engage. So I got, stuck in the revolving door for a little bit, then reached out to Tom and Mary, kind of figured some things out and got on the straight line and have been there ever since. And, it's amazing. It's such a blessing. Um, it's not just, you don't even know how much of your life changes until you're on the other side. So, yeah, I'm doing great. And this is a huge reason why.
So you said there, you don't understand how much your life changes until you're on the other side of it. Do you feel like some of the ways in which you used to think when you were struggling with porn in the past, you've become maybe more aware of the ways in which you used to thought in the past and like how those thought patterns maybe were irrational? Because at least that's how I feel. It's like I've kind of gone beyond it, like yourself, and you
Mhm.
kind of get to a point where you're like, oh damn, like I used to think in very different ways to how I do now, and you kind of see a lot of those thought patterns and those beliefs as almost a symptom of being in the addiction.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the interesting things is you actually kind of start to forget. It almost doesn't feel real that you were in that addiction, you were that person for that long. But yeah, you definitely get reminders, right? You sometimes see other people and you see their junky thoughts and their rationalizations. Or you maybe, read your journal and something. You're like, wow, I was in a really bad place. Um, so yeah, you definitely, you know, junky thinking becomes apparent, but also I think just kind of part of the natural healing process. You also start to forget.
Yeah, that's so true. It is a bit like you become a different person due to the change in the neural pathways that it's hard to sort of relate as much to like who you once were or to other people maybe still in the same position that we once were, removing the triggers or sort of installing the blockers, counting streaks, doing that sort of stuff. It just kind of becomes, as you say, a bit of a distant memory, and you put some real distant between who you become and who you once were. Um, but as you say, it's also great that you can become quite aware of, junky thoughts that other people might have, or even if you have junky thoughts yourself, you're able to deal with them correctly.
Mhm.
And how's that been for you in terms of the application of the script? I mean, we just kind of talked about it a little bit
Yeah,
before
yeah.
we recorded, but how are you finding that process of still using the script and dealing with the addictive part of the mind?
Yeah, that's pretty simple really, right? I think it's it's two words, script choice, right? That's it. It's whenever you need to use a script and need quote unquote and right? You feel it. You feel the cognitive dissonance, you feel the discomfort. You know when you need to use the script. Um you use it and you make your choice. It's really that simple. It takes a couple minutes, sometimes less. So it's in a way the most simple thing in the world. But
Mm.
definitely, if you're early in the process and you have all the junky thoughts, there will be you know, oh, I'm never going to get free. This doesn't work. Blah blah blah. And again, it just kind of goes back to script choice. That's always the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like since you first joined BCA to now, things have become more simple in terms of your approach? Because I remember when we first did
Yeah.
calls, as you'd expect, the addictive part of the mind was talking. So there was confusion, convolution, junky thoughts, unanswerable questions. we all have it. I totally get it. I've had all of that as well, loads and loads of times. Um, but you do get to a position, I think, when time passes by and through experience and, relapsing can even be part of that experience. But you get to a point where you realize like simplicity is so essential to solving this problem.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's kind of good to just turn your brain off, right? You don't, part of it is right. You don't need to answer the unanswerable questions. You don't need to engage with the junky thoughts. You have these thoughts, but those thoughts are not really you. It's, it's a, it comes from within you, but it's not you. You are the being that reacts to your thoughts, not the being that has those thoughts. And yeah, it's really simple, right? It's just script and a choice.
Yeah, yeah, nice. And I've seen that you have encouraged and kind of helped out some other guys in BCA over the last, maybe 6 months as well. As you've used the method for a longer period of time than a lot of guys who, they joined the program, maybe they're a bit unsure on things. And,
Yeah.
I've noticed quite a few comments here and there, a few posts. And then the most recent post that you shared in here was, this one titled "The World Sorely Needs You," which I think would be quite interesting to talk about. So I'll just read out the post and then, we can get into a bit of a conversation around this because I think it's such an important topic to bring up. And I think we need more role models in society who are comfortable saying, hey, I used to maybe struggle with porn, but I'm not that guy anymore. And it is possible to go beyond this problem and live our life without pornography and how that can impact women and relationships as well. So, the post that you shared was, this one here. It says, there's a subreddit called anti pornography, and I expected it to be mostly guys trying to quit, similar to NoFap, but it turns out it's mostly women who have been traumatized by the effects of porn on men in their lives and are sharing their stories. All this to say, the world sorely needs men who have self control, who don't feed into the abusive system of digital sexual content and bring further toxicity into the world. And then you shared a few images, screenshots from that Reddit. And, this one here, it says, just losing hope. I can't believe people consume porn. I think of a simpler time when seeing your partner naked was sacred and a gift. I'm repulsed people view this type of content and don't see an issue. It's not natural. It's so unhealthy. It's ruining men, women, children, relationships. How have we gotten this far? Gone. Sexualizing complete strangers as if that isn't somebody's mother, child, friend, even. It's unreal. I don't even want to live in a world where this type of thing is occurring. Especially as a neurodivergent person, it breaks my heart. Dot dot dot. So yeah, do you want to talk to me a little bit about this post and just your perspective on what's going on out there in society?
Yeah. Well, speaking, this ties back to your earlier question, right? Of who you were when you were in the addiction. And just kind of, going into that a little bit, right? You have these horrible self esteem issues because you're doing this thing that you don't want to do that's bad for you, that's probably bad for society, right? It's gross. You objectify women, right? It's a very, low kind of gross act, but you also don't know how to stop. So you have all these self-esteem issues. And really that's just the addictive part of the mind, right? It's saying you're unworthy, you're unlovable. It's giving you all those bad feelings so that you'll say, well, I can't quit. I'm worth nothing. I might as well engage, right? Um, so when you're in this addiction, you walk around with these huge self-esteem issues. It's, for me, it was like I would struggle with eye contact sometimes. I'd struggle with speaking to strangers, just everything. Right? It's just, I was super, super insecure. And I think, that, that comes out in the way you interact with other people. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is it really does train you and kind of bring out the tendency in men to just view women as objects. And that's not healthy for either party, right? It's
Mm,
and so thinking of that, right? It makes sense, right? I think if you're in a close relationship with someone, if it's your significant other, right? Like you're going to feel the effects of this in your relationship. There's no way that you couldn't.
mm,
And a lot of the posts I've seen in that subreddit is like, I broke up with my boyfriend because I found out he was on OnlyFans and lying to me, right? Things like that. Um, yeah, so I mean, it just like, of course, it affects the relationship. How could it not?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting perspective because I think there kind of needs to be this bridge and understanding between men's personal experience struggling with porn. So, like guys like me, guys like yourself, and other people who have struggled with this problem.
Hmm.
And then the women who are in the relationship with someone who's in that struggle. Because, if we have a look at, another comment here, there's someone saying, I lost my boyfriend to OnlyFans. So, as you say,
Right.
a week ago, I'd have told you that I was happily in a relationship, blah, blah, blah. And then they're just talking about how, there's a lack of communication going on. There's another post in here, that you shared, someone saying, so a few weeks ago, my boyfriend of 4 years confessed kind of out of nowhere that he secretly goes to the bathroom to watch videos of random girls on Instagram, like fashion videos, dances, whatever. And he gets off to them because the idea of me being hurt and upset by it turned him on. I feel so disgusted by myself and so ashamed, and I don't know what to do. I feel so humiliated and violated. I don't want to eat, dot, dot, dot. So
Mm.
just kind of want to bring up that point there, this woman feeling ashamed and humiliated. I think that is kind of the problem that we have now in society is there can kind of be this conflict between the men and the women in a relationship. And sometimes, understandably, the woman or the partner, because it could obviously be any gender, the partner of the person who is in the addiction to porn can feel very hurt, can feel very betrayed, can feel like maybe there's something wrong with their appearance and that the person's, jerking off in the bathroom to the dances on Instagram or TikTok because of them, but it isn't really about that. It's more to do with addiction. And it's
Hmm.
more to do with addicting your pathways, the lack of understanding around this issue. And as you said, earlier on, a lot of the men, I mean, you said, they don't want to be sort of looking at this content and it kind of grosses them out. But I think as we know, they do want to, but they also want to stop. And there's that conflict in the mind for the man in this situation. And I think these posts as well, for some people, they could even get like, people hearing this into like feelings of deprivation where they feel like, okay, all these people are saying this is gross, it's disgusting, it's like destroying these relationships. Therefore, I can't watch porn. But what would you say is the truth here, and how can we kind of help people reframe this a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question, yeah. So obviously you can, right? Obviously you can watch those videos and porn and whatever. There's no way to prevent that, really. You could go on any social media and find that content. Uh, and I guess to that point, right? You're not missing out on anything. For anyone who has been in this addiction, right? You know that you feel worse engaging with it than you did before. And so you have this moment of discomfort of, oh, maybe that will feel good. Maybe I'm going to miss out on something. And if you let that moment of discomfort pass, you'll actually, you'll have so much more pleasure, so much less discomfort. You'll be at peace. It's so, yeah, I mean, just you're not missing out on anything.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think that's where the glamorization comes in. Is a
Yeah.
lot of people, myself included in the past, of course, we can think like, oh, we need this. It's going to help us with stress. Like the urge keeps on building up. I need to release. I need to get some, this tension out of my body. Or it's going to
Mm.
help me like concentrate with my work, things like that. Right. So for yourself as well, because like most people, they do have that glamorizing of the behavior. They believe it's giving them something they really need, like, the relief from the stress or, relief from being lonely. Can you think in ways that you've glamorized it before, back when you were in the addiction?
Yeah, totally. And I think the biggest thing is last year when I first started this, I had, it took a while, but I had a belief it's like this brings pleasure, right? This feels good. This is right. There's something here in it. Kind of what I said just a minute ago, right? It's like it doesn't actually. It's you're not losing anything. You're actually gaining so much. because the only thing this ever brings you is that temporary relief from that very temporary discomfort, right?
Mm.
It's an ineffective coping method. Um, so yeah, I think that was a big one. It's just like realizing it's like you're not missing out on anything. There's nothing here. There never was.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And then understanding as well that acting on the desire is the thing that's creating more desire
Yep.
to engage in
Yep.
the behavior again.
Yeah. Totally. Just keeps you in that cycle forever.
Yeah. And then, you get more temporary relief and then
Yeah.
you want to do it again and then temporary relief and rounds and rounds and rounds.
Exactly.
And then, you said there's a lot of benefits to be gained from actually stopping this behavior. Do you want to just talk about, those benefits a bit? How are things
Totally.
different now, would you say, for you?
Yeah. Probably the biggest benefit, maybe the biggest benefit, is the self esteem, right? Because when you've engaged, you have the addictive part of the mind, and it's just, yapping at you. It's, you know, saying every horrible thing you can imagine. Um, and it's really hard, right? It sucks to be in that position of, you have all these thoughts of I'm never going to be good enough and nobody likes me and whatever. And you just live in that state. And when that goes away, it just changes everything. You just have this weight lifted off your chest, the monkey's off your back, right? And it makes everything so much easier. You're just,
Mm.
I'm so much more at ease whenever I go out in public, whenever I talk to people. I'm just so much more relaxed. I have no fear. Um, that's huge, right? It it's almost hard to put into words.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Like when you're in the addiction, let's say you just relapse, like you'll be talking to someone and
Yeah,
you can just be thinking in your head, like, can this person tell? Like, can they see it
yeah,
through me somehow
yeah,
that I've just relapsed? Like, you just feel like a zombie, and it's such a horrible feeling.
yep,
So it's nice to bring up, that benefit that you don't have to experience that anymore. You don't have that like internal
yeah,
battle going on or that those self-deprecating thoughts. And instead, what you can see is that a lot of that is the direct consequence of relapsing. That is the addictive part of the mind being back in control
yeah.
after a relapse. That's why we have those thoughts, right?
Hmm.
But like beyond it, you can just talk to people naturally without, yeah, the monkey on your back kind of feeling.
100%, 100%. And going to that feeling, right? I think um, if you're the type of person who's maybe engaging every day, multiple times a day, and you've been rationalizing it, right? You feel those effects, you just don't know what causes it. So I know a lot of people who can, going back to the societal thing, right? I know a lot of guys who are like, I just, kind of feel tired all the time. I'm just not that motivated, right? Um, I, or I just have social anxiety, right? And I look at these guys and I'm like, yeah, but this is undeniably contributing, if not causing that. Based on my experience, based on your experience, based on everyone I know who was in the addiction and then got clean, right? It's like, this is definitely influencing it. And then from there, it's kind of an interesting question of like, is that person ready to accept that they have a problem? And a lot of times they're not, but it's kind of you see it in other people, even sometimes when they don't see it in themselves.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely hear that. And nowadays we've got, kind of a lot of people out there sort of trying to diagnose people with different, disorders, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this person's got this thing or that thing. And then, maybe trying to sell them some drugs,
Yeah.
some drugs,
Yeah.
rather than actually looking at, okay, well, how's this person thinking?
Hmm.
How's this person feeling? What actions are going on in their life? And like when you zoom out and you actually just look at someone's like actions in their life and see how that's driven by the way they're thinking about things and therefore how they're feeling, it's quite clear, I think, to go, okay, well, yeah, I mean, you're watching porn like 3, 4 times a week
Yeah.
and you're feeling really anxious. Like, what do you really expect,
Right. Right. Exactly. What do you expect? And going back to the whole, when you watch porn, when you're on Instagram, um, and you've chosen to engage, to try and, from my experience, to try and kind of quiet those addictive part of the mind thoughts. which are now going to be louder, stronger than ever, you turn to whatever you can. So you binge YouTube, you binge Instagram, you watch a movie, you binge some food because you're just trying to, you've already chosen option A. You already chose that I'm not going to face this discomfort. I'm just going to engage. Um, and I think you try and choose that for as long as you can until everything collapses. Um, and the whole you're facing this internal abuse from the addictive part of the mind. So yeah, so you're not just watching porn. It affects you in so many different ways. Um, you chose to watch porn, so then you chose to eat junk food and not go to the gym, and you cancel your plans to hang out with that friend, right? It snowballs so quickly, so massively. Um, and yeah, like I think it would help so many people, so many men. Um, yeah, undeniably, but it's kind of one of those things of like you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Yeah, yeah. That's such an interesting point about how after relapsing, did it's about the mind so in control that you have all these thoughts, and that can include a lot of self-deprecation, a lot of unanswerable questions. The mind can just be like in a lot of discomfort afterwards, a lot of desire, and therefore you want to, yeah, binge some movies, get on Netflix, just scroll and scroll and scroll,
Hmm.
eat a load of junk food, whatever. But I think what's going on now, which is quite an interesting point to raise here, is that most people will see that as, oh, it's the dopamine. You've
Hmm.
now engage in a behavior that releases a lot of dopamine. So
Yeah,
now you're looking for more dopamine, 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 rather than looking at it from the angle of, okay, well, actually, you've just engaged in a compulsive behavior
mhm,
by refusing to face the addictive part of the mind. Now the addictive part of the mind is in control, and it's basically bullying you into submission, into engaging in compulsive behaviors more. And that's really
totally.
what the discomfort in the mind's going on. So yeah, do you want to kind of share your take on that? Because
Yeah.
this is going to sound so weird to like 99% of people who listen to this who haven't got the Beyond Compulsion education, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, and I think that touches a much bigger topics, which are very important, right? Where you say dopamine, and it sounds so scientific of like, oh, well, dopamine is a neurotransmitter, blah, blah, blah. And you're right. Like, probably most people think, oh, it's just because, yeah, I spiked my dopamine, so I'm looking for more dopamine. Um, Therefore, the solution is to stop spiking my dopamine, and then I won't want it in the future. And all of that really takes away agency. It treats your brain as number one, a purely chemical organ, and it's not chemical, and it's more electrical than it is chemical. Um, and yeah, it takes away agency, right? It's like you're just this, test tube with chemicals floating around and stuff, and it totally denies that, you really do have the power to change everything. You have the power to change your life. You decide who you are. And, I think the number one lie of addiction that keeps people stuck, right, is they don't believe that freedom is possible. They don't believe they have the power to get out of the addiction, to make a choice. They probably don't even believe that they're addicted. They don't either know or recognize that it's their fault that they're addicted, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Agency is a good word here,
Yeah.
like just choosing to take responsibility and realizing that we have human consciousness, like we have a rational mind that can make good decisions moment by moment, like consistently
Hmm.
throughout. We're not a laboratory rat. Like, I
Yeah.
don't get why everyone's so obsessed with the neuroscience when so much of it is extrapolated from studies on animals,
Yeah.
and it doesn't account for the fact that we have a human mind, and that is exactly what separates us from animals and what's led
100%.
to us creating amazing things, right? So yeah, I'm really glad that you've gone in to talk about that side of things as well. And I never really thought we were going to talk about that today, but
Yeah.
just have one other person, on the podcast, other than like me and Mary and other BCA clients, I guess, kind of going, hang on a minute, this neuroscience isn't actually helping us, because I'm sure like before joining BCA, you'd probably learn loads about neuroscience,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah, I read tons of books. I read, what is it? The dopamine something, the dopamine drug or something like that. The Molecule of
The
More.
dopamine trap, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. The Molecule of More. I read that book. Yeah, I read all the books, right? Um, and yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think, uh, like for a specific in this issue, right? A lot of times you'll see mainstream news sites, whatever. You'll see people, and they'll cite this one thing. They say, "Oh, masturbation reduces your chance of prostate cancer." And it's funny because that came from a study that was done on men over the age of 65, right? So, and this was like a decade ago, right? So these guys were, when they were our age, the internet did not exist, right? So first thing, right, they had a completely different experience. And second, it was men over the age of 65. They were measuring frequency of orgasms proportionally to risk of prostate cancer, and they found that men who had more orgasms proportionally had a lower risk of prostate cancer. But I mean, the study's a mess because it's like you're not controlling for variables, right? What if, I mean, the risk of prostate cancer might be lower just because these men who are having orgasms also probably have a partner, right? And we know that loneliness is one of the worst things for your health. And then on top of that, they didn't control for whether these men were masturbating or having sex. They were just measuring orgasms. But somehow, men over the age of 65 having more orgasms, you know, having a lower risk of prostate cancer. Um, and even that, right? It just depends on what data set you're using, right? But besides the point, that somehow became all men should masturbate 3 times a day because it reduces your chance of prostate cancer. And it's like, it's such a blatant abuse of science. But unfortunately, I think, most people either don't know or, I mean, maybe just don't care. Uh, because they see that and they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to read the headline of this completely, you know, bastardized study and take it as an absolute fact.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't actually know about the kind of history and origin of that.
Yeah.
Well, junkie thought that I hear a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
that is what it is to me. It's just a junkie thought that people people have, and it's an easy one for people to kind of believe, I suppose, unless they think critically about things. And that is the big thing. Is I think critical thinking seems to be almost like a dying art
Mm,
at this point in society. Um, but yeah, the amount of times that guys have spoke to me and said like, "Hey, what if I get prostate cancer from no longer masturbating?" It's just insane.
it
And
is.
yeah, like those articles just validate people's junky thoughts, and therefore they get a lot of views, and
Yeah.
that's probably making someone some money somewhere, I'm sure.
Well, totally right. And you have to think, I mean, this is a massive industry. You know, uh, I don't know if you, another post I made was talking about, there was this, the Florida, I think it's the gubernatorial race. One of the candidates got a lot of attention because he said, I'm going to tax OnlyFans 50%. And so he got into an argument with, I think she's the top OnlyFans creator, Sophie Rain. And so she makes like $40 million a year or something, right? And she doesn't even own she's just a creator, right? Um, yeah, so this is a huge industry, huge. I've heard that, most of the top 10 most visited websites on the internet are porn, right? So, and obviously, when you have that much money flowing into an industry like this, the industry is going to spend money on lobbying, and they're also going to fund research studies that support their bottom line. That's what every industry does. If you were to look at, food or agrochemical, right? They fund research studies that make them look good because it's marketing. Um, and so to that point, right? Like, I think there's something to be said about like you can't trust everything you see.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. And makes you think like how many of people's junky thoughts or unanswerable questions in one way or another are sort of taken from the internet, and that information in one way or another is being like almost funded,
Hmm.
when you go really, really down the rabbit holes by like the porn industry on some level.
Yeah.
Like that is very, very possible. Because people who are making money out of consumers who are watching porn and are getting addicted to porn, they're obviously going to want to keep on spreading the message, on some level that porn's fine, it's normal, it doesn't have these consequences.
Yep.
Oh, if you don't masturbate, you're going to get prostate cancer, etc., etc. And it's kind of scary. And like just going back to this post that you recently shared in school, like here's another comment from one of these women in Reddit. So, does anyone else feel like trying to date in a generation of porn consumers is making them asexual? When I open literally any social media app, I literally see degeneracy and porn sickness everywhere. The thought that this is my dating pool makes me not want to ever go on another date again. I feel like I'm in hell. It's so dystopian. It's not one isolated incident, it's legitimately everywhere. Even when you try to block certain pages, it's everywhere. And the fact that virtually no one I know in real life agrees, let alone speaks out about it, makes me feel genuinely crazy. I'll post anti porn stuff on my Instagram stories and I get zero likes. Dot dot dot. Yeah, it is true. Porn is kind of everywhere, and it's so like part of sort of social media culture now. It's just become so normalized. It's in music videos. It is on. Yeah, it's everywhere on social media. As you say, there's people making 40 million a year as porn stars, pretty much just on OnlyFans.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, what does society sort of need instead? Do you think, Adam?
Well, that's a good question. I think to put this in a broader context, I think we've seen a lot of really interesting things. We've seen nicotine. Nicotine used to be, mainstream, and then there was, kind of 90s, early 2000s. It died down. It never went away, but it went from something that everyone did, and you'd smoke on an airplane, to kind of a fringe activity of like, oh, you're one of those people who still needs help quitting. And then within our lifetimes, we've seen it become super normal again, where almost all young people I know vape. And obviously it depends. So, I used to be an engineer, and, now I work in restaurants. And so almost everyone I know in the restaurant industry vapes. Fewer engineers vaped, but still a lot of them did. Um, so nicotine's come back. Nicotine is normal, right? Uh, when I was a kid, right, you had to go to a casino to gamble, and now everyone gambles significant sums of money multiple times a week on every sports event, right? Um, so I think we're seeing, and then even taking out the whole porn aspect, I think porn is a huge reason of what keeps men addicted to the internet. But for women or whatever, right, I think the internet itself is just also kind of addictive, where you can scroll TikTok, Instagram, whatever for hours, right? And at certain points in my life, I did. I watched YouTube for hours. I have friends who just, if they had a day off, they wouldn't do anything. They'd just, be on their phone all day, right? So I think we have all of these very harmful vices that have been normalized. And the thing is, right, it doesn't, if everyone's, jumping off a cliff, it doesn't matter how normal it is, it's still going to hurt, right? You're still going to die, right? So, um, I think there's a lot of things, and to be honest, I think the only recourse is to take responsibility, because I a lot of these things, I think they're just not sustainable, um, as a society, right? And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to naturally see people kind of, separate, and there's going to be people who take responsibility and get clean and get a hold of their lives, and then there's people, if they can't do that, they're just going to self-destruct.
Yeah, that's so true. And like, it's nice that we're kind of finishing on that note of, okay, well, the solution is to take responsibility because, today's podcast, we've kind of pointed at the normalization of what's going on in society.
Mhm.
But what that could do for some people is almost validate the junky thought of, oh, well, this is just the way things are. This is just what's going on around me.
Yeah.
Everyone else does it. It's normal. I've just got to like fall into the trap of being like this person who does all this stuff. But the truth is, like, every single individual has the potential to take complete responsibility and sort of break out of the current mold of the degeneracy, the normalization of addiction, what's going on all around us.
Hmm.
I mean, you've always sort of struck me as someone who's quite comfortable separating yourself from the norm,
Yeah.
not doing what everyone else is doing. What's led to you kind of being like that? What sort of
Mm.
thought patterns or beliefs, or what kind of upbringing have you had that's led to you actually being one of these few people who's actually willing to go, hang on, actually, what's going on in society is a bit of a mess. I don't want to live my life like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it came from my parents. My parents, uh, you know, they we me and my siblings were put in, school, public school, and just had some really bad experiences where, teachers were being just kind of abusive and punitive, and there was really no recourse. And my mom kind of thought, it was like, I don't want someone else to raise my kid, right? I don't want to spend 40, 50 hours a week with these strangers working on things I don't care about, and I'll maybe get to see my kids a couple hours in the evening, and we won't really know each other or anything like that. And so they made a decision kind of to homeschool us, and that always kind of, it set us out, as different from most kids and things like that. And I got at some point just very comfortable with it. And looking back, I look back now, and let's go to the vaping discussion, right? I have, a lot of friends, and one of them says, he's like, yeah, I started vaping in middle school because this girl I had a crush on vaped, right? It's just things like that. And I kind of look at it as like, yeah, I'm glad I wasn't as close to a lot of those influences as many of my peers were. I knew,
Mhm.
kind of going to the pharmaceutical discussion, right? I knew a lot of my peers and friends and stuff were put on antidepressants and ADHD medication and things like that. Um, as children, right? And I'm glad that I wasn't, because even if I would want to take those drugs, I'd want to take it as an adult with my choice, not the choice of, the school therapist saying, "Oh yeah, he needs Adderall."
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's so interesting. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah,
That you're homeschooled, and that can definitely result in you maybe thinking more critically about things and getting comfortable with doing things differently to what's normal as such in society. And I think
yeah,
the message for anyone really should be what's normal in society is not always what's good for you, as an
totally.
individual. I've definitely learned this through my life. Like, if I just did what's normal right now, like, yeah, I'd be in an addiction. I wouldn't be that happy. I'd be in the constant conflicts. I'd be regretting my choices. I'd be feeling a lack of integrity. I'd be making really, really bad decisions just day by day. And, Mary Portis, who's kind of taught me and you the Beyond Compulsion method overall, um, her way of thinking is so radically different to the mainstream right now because she's more kind of hippie vibes,
Yeah,
over in Portland in Oregon. She's sort of set up Beyond Compulsion way before kind of the internet and the neuroscientists and all that sort of information came along around, dopamine and porn and the sort of stuff that we're seeing in society now. It's so radically different that for people like me and you willing to maybe take a bit of a risk and try something else out, it can garner just completely amazing results. And that's why we're here today, I suppose, to share a different perspective on porn and hopefully, set a bit of a good example that, you can actually stop watching porn and feel good about that choice as well. And from the start of this podcast, you made it very clear, like, the benefits of stopping this do absolutely outweigh that very, very short, fleeting, temporary relief that you actually get from watching porn, right?
oh, massively, right? Like, not only can you feel good doing this, this is, I think, the path to feel good. This is It feels so much infinitely better than being stuck, you know, in those compulsions. It's infinitely better. I think the worst punishment on earth is like maybe addiction, right? It's terrible.
Yeah, I'd agree. And how do you think the world and maybe society would be if, let's say, everyone was actually able to stop their addictions and, think through their choices, moment by moment, perhaps
Mm.
using a script, let's say, and make good decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is maybe a darker thought. I don't think that's. I don't know if that's possible, everyone, right? I also think, kind of going back to the idea of, corrupted science and things like that, I think there's real incentive to not, right? I think in a broader sense, right, what this method really teaches is like agency, right? It's taking responsibility, it's taking your life back. Um, and the opposite of that would be being a victim, right? Life happened to you. You're not in control. All of these horrible things happen to you. You just have these desires, and these desires are not a choice. These desires didn't come from you. And, you know, because you're just made this way, you can't do anything about it. And because you have this problem, you might as well engage in some other bad things, right? That's kind of where that mindset leads, the victim mindset. And as we've seen, right? I think one of the favorite posts I've seen from you is, I think you're at a train station or something, right? And they're giving out free nicotine gum, right? Right? Yeah. I think, victims are easy to control and easy to profit from. So I think there's strong incentive to create victims. And I also just think I've tried to help as many people as I can, and sometimes you just see people where a lot of people, I think, have a tough time accepting responsibility. They have a tough time, right, with this accepting, okay, you have to accept that you had blame, that something was your fault in order to realize that you can do something about it. Because if you're at fault for something, it also means you can change it. Um, but I think a lot of people get stuck at that place. Um, So, short answer, I don't think everyone would ever be agentic and take responsibility. Not 100% of society. But going, I guess, to your question of like, what would it look like if people had more, right? And I think you'll just see it's healthier, right? I think you'll see less people, less women saying, oh my God, men are so horrible. They're so evil. They're so gross. They're so perverted. You'll see more men who are just more in control of themselves, right? We talked about, you've talked about this on previous podcasts of like, this leads to a bit of infidelity. And I think I would argue it's infidelity in itself, where you are getting sexual pleasure from typically multiple women, right? Who are not your partner, who you don't know. You're kind of using them as an object and stuff. And so, sure, maybe you're not, in person using their actual body, but it's a blurry line, and the boundaries can push very quickly. Um, Especially if you're conditioning yourself of, oh, I can't control, my sexuality. I just blah, blah, blah. I need a release, blah blah blah. That's naturally okay. You're in a club or whatever, and your partner's not there. Yeah, I think you're much more likely to cheat on them. Um, so I think it would just, society would be a lot healthier. We'd have better families. We'd have better relationships between the genders, and you know I guess on another note too, with this self-control, with this, you know agency, it impacts every area of your life. You do better at your work, you work harder, you don't engage in other bad compulsions, you're not doing drugs and bad food and whatever, right? So you just become the best version of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And another thing as well, I guess, is like without the constant demand for engaging in compulsivities, whether it's porn, whether it's nicotine,
Hmm.
whether it's the junk food, it's scrolling, there'd be so much less supply of products which add literally no real value to society.
Yeah.
And therefore, maybe we could sort some shit out that actually matters.
Hmm.
Things like global warming, perhaps, or inequality, other massive macro issues. There'd be so much more space to actually have society's attention focused on things that really do matter, rather than just pointless shit that everyone's kind of just going around in circles on in some kind of hamster wheel of addiction.
Totally right. Yeah, you got to fix yourself before you can fix anyone else or anything else.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right, cool. We'll wrap it up here, Adam. when I invited you on, I knew we'd talk a little bit about this post that you shared in school. I didn't know exactly where the conversation would go, but I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. I think we think in a very, very similar way on things, and hopefully some other people listening will resonate as well. And this will offer a bit of a breath of fresh air to someone who also thinks, yeah, what's going on in society is pretty bad right now, and maybe they want to take a different approach as well. So thank you so much for coming on, Adam. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully we have you on a podcast again down the line as well.
Thanks, Tom. Likewise, it was great. Love talking to you, and yeah, I could talk to you. I feel like for like 6 hours, and I'm happy to come on
Me too.
anytime in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. All right, take care. Have a great day, and yeah, cheers for listening, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.